Hey, Alice, Living Universe, it's Zander, and welcome back to another episode of How Zander Would Book, a series where I take stories from WWE's past and talk about how I would have booked them differently. Do I do it? Nah. Today's topic is a very broad topic, to say the least. We're talking about Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks, Bayley, and Charlotte Flair, the four horsewomen of the WWE, the pillars of WWE's women's division for the last 7 years. They've all had their ups and downs. Some have had more ups and downs, and others have had more downs than ups. With Bayley going from the company's true successor to John Cena in terms of being over and beloved by children to being completely buried 2 weeks into her debut. Sasha Banks going AWOL for half a year, twice, because WWE was constantly just giving her start-stop pushes and would never just stick to one plan with her. Becky Lynch being extremely over and the top star in the company in 2018, only to have her shot at the championship taken away and given to Charlotte. Twice! Oh, and I said downs, right? As for Charlotte, she was injured for a little while in 2020. She's missing WrestleMania this year for petty reasons. So yeah, let's just address the Supergirl in the room. Because between watching this company for 7 years, since the Women's Revolution, and running a universe, I know good and well that you can't give Charlotte a single win anymore without somebody saying, Super Flair wins again. The same way that they were with John Cena, and the same way that they were with Roman Reigns. Now, with my last booking, I went on for a solid 10 minutes about how WWE royally dropped the ball with Bobby Roode. But since there are 4 of them, let's try and lightning round with these ones. Bayley was the lovable hugger of NXT. The whole crowd cheered at her like a female John Cena, but in the best way possible. The most over babyface in all of NXT, possibly the company, for just some time, putting on great matches week in and week out. There's a match many people have forgotten about between her and AJ Lee on a random episode of NXT. Her match to take over Fatal 4-Way with Charlotte, the Fatal 4-Way later that year, and most importantly, her series of matches with Sasha Banks. Bayley went on to hold the NXT Women's title until she lost it to Asuka. She vanished for a while, had a rematch, lost and put over Asuka the next night. She was called up to Raw to team up with Sasha Banks against Charlotte and Dana Brooke. We'll get there. She lost to Dana Brooke on her second week in a botched cheating pin a lot before becoming Raw Women's Champion with the help of Charlotte, or beating Charlotte with the help of Sasha to ending Charlotte's undefeated streak on pay-per-view because apparently Battleground 2016 doesn't count. Bayley then went into a horrible feud with Alexa Bliss after WrestleMania that involved This Is Your Life and Bayley being scared of the kendo stick. After that, she took a huge backseat to Alexa Bliss being the top player in the Raw Women's division. Didn't do much until she and Sasha Banks were winning the Raw Tag Team Championships, retained them by DQ at Fastlane, lost them to the Iconics at WrestleMania. Sasha, well, we'll get there. Bayley then moved to SmackDown, won Money in the Bank, cashed it in on the same night, and became SmackDown Women's Champion. Held it until she unexpectedly turned heel on Becky Lynch and joined the newly heel Sasha Banks. Lost it to Charlotte Hell in a Cell, truly turned heel a few days later on SmackDown by taking a pickaxe to the wacky waving inflatable arm flowing tube men. I will not be calling them Bayley buddies, that's stupid. Winning the title and going on what many consider an incredible run. My opinion is to one side. She held the title for almost a year, won the women's tag titles again, and now she remains one of the most over heels in the entire company. Segueing into boss time, Sasha Banks was the boss in NXT, had incredible matches, took the title off of Charlotte in a Fatal 4-Way, had insane matches with Becky Lynch and Bayley, was called up as the NXT Women's Champion to join Team Bad with Naomi and Permanent Heat Vacuum Tamina in a segment that I'll get to momentarily. Lost the title to Bayley and wrapped up her time in NXT. Got lost in the shuffle before returning to attack Charlotte at the Royal Rumble. Many thought she'd win the belt at Mania, but then Charlotte won LOL, which continued to happen for a while before on the first night after the draft, my birthday in fact, Sasha wins the Raw Women's title, immediately lost it back to Charlotte at SummerSlam, won it back a few weeks later, lost it back a few weeks later, won it back, lost it again in the street fight. Charlotte and Sasha were then booked into the first ever Women's Hell in a Cell match for the first time ever, those 3 words becoming synonymous with the Women's Revolution in 2016. And in this moment that we all thought Sasha would be crowned the Women's Champion for the foreseeable future, she lost again because Charlotte won yet again. And Sasha won it back, then Charlotte won it back. Sasha was going to win at Mania 33, but she didn't. Came back, took the belt from Bliss at SummerSlam, lost it the next week, went into a weird bickering feud with Bayley that brought Patrick Shelby back into the mix for some reason. They fought, they made up, they won the women's tag titles. We addressed that already. She walked out of the company for a while, returned with blue hair, as a heel, lost to Becky inside the cell, turned heel, just turning her into Bayley's side piece. She eventually won the belt from Asuka due to Bayley interference, and you guessed it, lost it in her first defense at SummerSlam. Before she and Bayley had a pretty great Hell in a Cell matchup with the SmackDown Women's title that Sasha now holds, at the time of recording this at least, and will be either defending it, losing it, or successfully retaining it against Bianca Belair. You don't have to tell me which one happened. Hey, You watched it live with me. I pre-recorded this. Next up is the man, the last kicker, my personal favorite of these four, and my celebrity crush, according to my junior yearbook in high school. I don't know, see that? Becky Lynch. Becky has the most genuine story of these four. She had a bland Irish gimmick for the start of her NXT run, was convinced to turn heel by Sasha Banks. I watched that episode, actually. Then suddenly at TakeOver, she had a whole career reboot when she went from Irish person to steampunk last kicker. Becky Lynch, she lost gracefully to Sasha Banks before being applauded by the crowd who embraced her after that match. She was called up in that segment that we're still getting to, before becoming just another face of the division for quite some time, lost to Natalya at Battleground, became the first SmackDown Women's Champion, lost to Alexa Bliss, became just another face in the crowd again before she started building some big-time momentum after WrestleMania 34. The crowd getting fully behind her as she beat everyone on the SmackDown, including Charlotte. Finally, Becky was going to be getting a one-on-one match with Carmella for the SmackDown Women's Championship when at SummerSlam, WWE decided, you know what this match needs? Charlotte. Charlotte won and was immediately added to the match at SummerSlam, and of course, she won. All the while, WWE tried to tell us that Becky, who had been scratching and clawing her way into this match, and Charlotte, who walked in, had one match, then got the title shot, had the exact same path to SummerSlam. Get well soon, Road Dogg. Becky turned heel on Charlotte, won the SmackDown title from her Hell in a Cell, and then titled herself The Man. And just like that, the most over star in 2018 was born, and Becky and Charlotte had killer matches over the title for the next few months. Becky continually winning before the injury took her out of the Rousey match at Survivor Series, pulling Steve Austin and getting more over with an injury because she was injured like a badass. Because after losing the belt to Asuka, having a beggar of a match at the Royal Rumble, she then won the Rumble, eliminated Charlotte, and challenged Ronda Rousey to a match at WrestleMania. Just like that, we had the match we wanted until WWE said, you know what this match needs? More Charlotte! Again, Becky was screwed out of what we all wanted. She was fired, unfired, suspended, unsuspended again, won a match by DQ to rejoin the main event, won said main event on a botched roll-up, pinned Rousey, had a few Baron Corbin and Lacey Evans that existed purely because she and Seth Rollins had gotten engaged outside of the WWE earlier that year, held the title for a year before she met a monster, Shayna Baszler. WrestleMania, Shayna having destroyed a full elimination chamber, and because she looked like a monster, you wouldn't want to waste that by having her lose to a roll-up at WrestleMania, right? Damn it. Anyways, a few weeks later, Becky revealed she was pregnant. At the time of recording, this is still out taking care of her and Seth Rollins' newborn daughter. Congratulations to the two of them, of course. And finally, let's talk about Charlotte Flair. How much time you got? Charlotte was a mainstay in NXT, won the vacated title after Paige was called up. She was in some great matches, was called up in that segment we're still getting to, beat Nikki Bella for the title, but didn't because Nikki needed to beat AJ Lee's record because she had the audacity to marry CM Punk. She then beat Nikki for the title and held it through WrestleMania, turning heel in the process because her dad is Ric Flair. Won the new women's title because Ric Flair got involved, held it forever, lost it, and won it back with Banks forever, then lost it to Bayley, as mentioned earlier. Moved to SmackDown. They actually really cooled down on the whole Charlotte wins LOL thing before she won the title from Natalya, and people were actually pretty thrilled, me included. She then ended Asuka's undefeated streak at WrestleMania, and Asuka just seemed to not be bothered by that fact. And instead, she just congratulated Charlotte and hugged her. Charlotte was then beat up by the Iconics after WrestleMania and was cashed in on by Carmella, who beat her relatively clean to retain. Charlotte went away for a bit before the SummerSlam thing we talked about just a minute ago happened. Had the feud with Becky, was randomly inserted into the WrestleMania match, then beat Asuka for the SmackDown title with no build or explanation. So they got another pointless stipulation in the main event because first time ever, don't you know? She lost the belt to Becky, won it back, was cashed in on by Bayley, won then lost, but down, back to heel. Bayley was moved to Raw, feuded for the tag titles against Asuka and Kairi Sane. Didn't win them, won the Royal Rumble because apparently WWE promised her things they didn't deliver on. She buried Rhea Ripley at WrestleMania for the NXT Women's title, put nobody over, lost it without being pinned, got injured, returned to win the tag titles with Asuka, had a weird feud with Lacey Evans that was called off due to Lacey Evans being pregnant. Congratulations, Lacey. And is now sitting out this year's WrestleMania in exchange for the release of her fiancé, Andrade. So, I'm taking a drink. I'm not cutting this out either. Zander Mania branded water bottles, ladies and gentlemen. So that was their stories in just 1,941 words. Now, let's get into that night that I've been talking about for so long. July 13th, 2015. Monday Night Raw aired live from Atlanta, Georgia. For weeks, Nikki Bella, Alicia Fox, and Brie Bella had been beating down Paige. Naomi had made friends with Tamina, and those six were the extent of the Divas division, as it was called at the time, at least. Other members of this roster at this point consisting of Summer Rae, Cameron, Rosa Mendez, and Natalya. Yeah, 10. That was the extent of the women's division. Sorry, Divas division. And so during a promo, out came Stephanie McMahon. The the creator of women and women's wrestling, where she then introduced Paige's new backup, Becky Lynch and Charlotte, and the new friend for Naomi and Tamina, NXT Women's Champion, but without her belt, Sasha Banks. And thus WWE decided that there was the Women's Revolution, born of what really just felt like Stephanie McMahon playing with her action figures, going like, and these three are a team, and you're friends now, and you go over here, and I was there for that. Thought it was cool at the time because I loved Becky, and at the time really liked Charlotte and Sasha. But in hindsight, it wasn't anything to write home about. So let's see what I can make of it. Now the goal here is to get all four of these girls on the main roster, have it culminate not at WrestleMania 32, but 33 in Orlando, the city they built their brands in NXT, with what we've all wanted, the Fatal 4-Way. So without any further ado, I've stalled long enough. Here is how Zander would book the 4 Horsewomen. So let's keep everything the same up until July 2015, because that's when this whole thing kind of just fell apart. As much as I don't give a single damn about the Bella Twins, we keep Brie and Nikki beating down Paige every week. But we cut the timetable of it down significantly. Instead, we have the Money in the Bank match where between Nikki and Paige, keep it mostly the same. Nikki cheats to win, and then the Bellas start beating down Paige. They grab a pair of chairs when they start to wrap one around Paige's neck, when suddenly, out comes Charlotte. Just Charlotte at the time. She rushes down to the ring while the commentators explain, "That's Charlotte from NXT, the daughter of the Nature Boy." Brie swings a chair, Charlotte ducks, spears Brie. Nikki and Charlotte begin to stare one another down, and Nikki tries to back down, only to have Paige standing behind her with a chair. Paige hits Nikki with the chair, then Charlotte locks in a figure 8, and the Divas champion taps out. Charlotte breaks the hold, Brie pulls Nikki from the ring, and the final shot for this scene is for these four at least, is Nikki and Brie cowering on the ramp, hugging one another and freaking out, while Charlotte and Paige celebrate in the ring. Charlotte Flair has arrived. The next night on Raw, Charlotte is interviewed by Renee Young, who asks her, "Why did you help Paige last night?" At Money in the Bank, and Charlotte tells her she sat by and watched Paige be beaten down by the Bellas for far too long. She's watched these supermodels play wrestlers for far too long, and that's time for a change in the WWE. It's time to add just a little bit of flair back to WWE. Later that night, it's announced that at Battleground it will be Charlotte and Paige versus the Bella Twins. That night, Charlotte beats Brie one-on-one. Over the next few weeks, we build Charlotte by having her get wins over the likes of Alicia Fox, Summer Rae, so on and so forth. Battleground comes and Charlotte and Paige win, with Charlotte tapping out Nikki Bella. Now you're probably wondering what's going on in NXT. Currently in NXT, Becky Lynch, Bayley, and Sasha Banks are involved in a three-way feud with TakeOver Brooklyn on the horizon. In real time, Bayley would win a number one contenders match and go on to win the title, but this time it's going to be Becky Lynch who wins the number one contenders match and the right to fight Sasha Banks at Brooklyn. The reason for this is because, one, I think the story works well for them here, as well as Becky being the underdog, and two, Becky winning the NXT Women's title is something that needs to happen in this booking. Her never winning it is an absolute crime, so she's the one taking it from Sasha Banks. I'll get back to NXT later. Meanwhile, we're now on the road to SummerSlam. Charlotte and Paige have beaten the Bellas, but now they find themselves in a situation where they have to face one another for an opportunity for the Divas Championship. That night on Raw, amidst the John Cena, Seth Rollins stuff, Brock and Undertaker are going to be pulled apart, and Roman and Dean finally teaming up for the first time. Charlotte and Paige go one-on-one, and let them just go at it. Charlotte wins by reversing a Paige turner and hitting natural selection, just barely scraping out the win over Paige. In this match, Paige shows a more vicious side of herself, using the 5 count, slamming her into the ring post, so on and so forth. Charlotte still wins. From there on, it's a big build between Charlotte and Nikki. Brie keeps trying to get involved. The Bellas making fun of Charlotte, calling her nothing but a daddy's girl, writing off her father's name. Charlotte responds by saying that her dad was a legend and she can wrestle circles around the Bellas, who have only gotten their opportunities thanks to their partners. Referring to, of course, John Cena, who was dating Nikki Bella at the time, and Daniel Bryan. The match comes at SummerSlam, and Charlotte wins. She taps out Nikki in the center of the ring and wins the Divas Championship. We're keeping AJ Lee's title record. Meanwhile, on TakeOver Brooklyn, Becky Lynch wins the NXT Women's title from Sasha Banks. The night after SummerSlam, we're on Monday Night Raw. Charlotte is the new Divas Champion. Ric Flair is there for a championship celebration, where he officially endorses his daughter as his true successor. And that's the most we'll be seeing Ric for this, because his time as Charlotte's manager was gaining go-away heat rather than heel heat. Charlotte gets her title celebration, is confronted by both Nikki Bella and Paige. The three get into a brawl, with Paige laying out Charlotte with a rampage and holding the title up over Charlotte with a foot on her chest. This leads to the Clash of Champions, where it's a triple threat match. Paige hits the rampage on Nikki Bella. Looks like she's about to pin Nikki when bang! Charlotte hits natural selection. 1, 2, 3. Charlotte retains. Charlotte's retained, and Paige has once again been screwed out of the title she believes is rightfully hers. Now, we find ourselves on the road to Hell in a Cell and NXT TakeOver Respect. So for TakeOver Respect, the main event, instead of being an Iron Woman match between Sasha and Bayley is an Iron Woman match between Becky, Sasha, and Bayley. The woman with the most falls by the final bell is champion. Becky wins that match by tapping out Sasha with only a few seconds left. But while this may be a little telling of who won't be winning that match at Respect, the night after Clash of Champions, the Bellas come out and start complaining about how Nikki didn't get a one-on-one rematch and instead was wrongfully forced to enter a triple threat instead. So Brie and Nikki are complaining and demanding that no good NXT has been needs to get out here so we can send her back to the minor leagues when it's boss time. Promise I won't be doing that again. Sasha grabs the mic and in the most Sasha Banks way rips into the Bellas before smashing the mic into Nikki's face. Sasha goes on to chase the Bellas off. Meanwhile, that night on Raw, we have Paige and Charlotte continuing their feud. Hell in a Cell comes, and on that show, Sasha Banks taps out Nikki Bella, and Charlotte taps out Paige to retain the Divas title. So, now we have Survivor Series on the horizon, and we're not doing Charlotte versus Sasha yet. No, my friends. Team Charlotte versus Team Banks, 5v5, and I know this is a novel concept, but build women that aren't horsewomen and don't have their last name be Bella, and this is possible. The stipulation is that the surviving members of either side get a championship shot against Charlotte at TLC. Team Charlotte is led by Flair, and she recruits Natalya due to their history, Summer Rae calling back to their NXT history, Brie Bella with Nikki being out with a herniated disc at this point, Brie agreeing to join as a slow face turn for her, and finally, because we're literally having to squeeze the whole division, Cameron, who we can just insert into this match with a joke of her being Charlotte's literal last option. Team Sasha is headed by Banks, who recruits Naomi and Tamina, who are pissed that Charlotte came and took their spots. Alicia Fox, who's in the exact situation as Cameron, and finally Paige, who begrudgingly agrees because she knows it's her only chance to get a championship match. The match goes like this. Fox and Cameron are gone right out of the gate. Summer Rae eliminates Tamina before immediately being eliminated by Naomi. Naomi and Banks work together to eliminate Natalya. Brie Bella taps out Paige in the S-Lock. Sasha takes out Brie with a Banks statement, so it's down to Naomi and Sasha against Charlotte 2-on-1, when suddenly Naomi grabs Sasha and plants her with anything but the rear view. Stepping back as Charlotte looks confused, then pins her. Sasha's eliminated, and it looks like Charlotte's about to get a win via forfeit when Naomi scoops her up, plants her again as well. 1, 2, 3. Naomi's pinned Charlotte and screwed over Banks, because remember what I said about building people other than horsewomen and Bellas? Yeah, now we're building Naomi versus Charlotte. I think that'd be a great match. Meanwhile, down the card, Sasha finds herself in a feud with Paige. I'd buy that for $1. Meanwhile, back in NXT again, Bayley's defeated Nia Jax to become #1 contender to the NXT Women's Championship, and will go on to defeat Becky Lynch at TakeOver London to become NXT Women's Champion. TLC comes, Charlotte beats Naomi in a ladder match to retain the Divas title. I think that'd be great for them. Meanwhile, Sasha beats Paige to pick up some more momentum. So now in the Royal Rumble, it's time for Charlotte versus Sasha to begin. Except not quite. Instead of the Royal Rumble, it's going to be a fatal four-way. Charlotte, Sasha, Naomi, and Paige. Naomi and Paige included because good things come to those who wait. And Charlotte and Sasha shouldn't just be facing off one-on-one every week. Charlotte retains by capitalizing on Banks wiping herself and Paige out with a dive, figure out, tapping Naomi out with a figure 8. The night after the Royal Rumble, Charlotte enters this feud with Brie Bella, similar to hers in real life. Brie getting a fluke roll-up on Charlotte to set them up for a title match at Fastlane. What about Sasha? Well, she now finds herself in a #1 contenders feud against Naomi, Natalya, and Summer Rae at Fastlane. Winner gets Charlotte Flair at WrestleMania. Again, we're building up some extra people. Sasha and Charlotte once again win their matches, and the feud for WrestleMania is simple. Face Charlotte, heel Sasha, but at this point I have a feeling people will be clamoring for a Sasha title win and may just be a bit sick of Charlotte winning all the time. After all, she's now been champion for a solid month longer than she was in real life, thanks to me putting the belt on her at SummerSlam instead of Night of Champions. So in the build, and quite possibly even in the match itself, we pull a double turn. Charlotte now working heel and Sasha face. Charlotte thinks she's entitled to respect because of her last name, and Sasha wants to prove that she's the best women's wrestler alive. She's pretty great. Down in NXT, things are the same as real life, with Asuka knocking out Bayley to win the women's championship, Becky Lynch putting over the likes of Emma and Nia Jax on her final farewell to NXT. WrestleMania comes, and Lita, and maybe even Trish, if we can get her there, unveil the women's championship that Charlotte and Sasha will fight for later that night. And this time, Sasha Banks wins because Charlotte did not need to win that triple threat, and I stand by it. She did not need to be the champion for the better part of 2 years, 1 week breaks in between reigns. So Sasha Banks is the new women's champion. The night after WrestleMania 32 sees a lot happen for the now finally renamed women's division. Naomi's confronted by a debuting Becky Lynch, who taps out Tamina in her debut on Raw. And later that night, Sasha Banks calls Charlotte to the ring because she wants to show respect for the match that the two put on. She calls Charlotte her greatest rival and says despite their feelings towards one another, there's nobody she would rather have made history against. She extends her hand to Charlotte for a handshake when she's jumped by a debuting Emma and Dana Brooke. Yes, I am well aware Emma would get injured a few weeks after, but it's fine. We can salvage this, sort of. Our first pay-per-view after Mania is Payback, where Sasha has to defend in a triple threat against Charlotte and Emma, who has Dana Brooke consistently interfering on her behalf. Now, I think about it, Emma and Dana were a great pair. Too bad they missed out on the women's tag division. Oh well. Anyways, Sasha just barely retains while elsewhere on the show, possibly even the pre-show if push comes to shove. Becky Lynch knocks off Naomi in some singles action. Now, Emma has likely gone out injured like in real life now. I could use the excuse of wrong place, wrong time, but we wouldn't have known that it was the wrong place, wrong time unless it happened, so it's kind of cheap. So the next night on Raw, Dana can attack Emma gently in a line with Charlotte, putting Emma out for the foreseeable future. Spoilers, there will not be Emelina shit in this booking. Now we find ourselves en route to Money in the Bank. Money in the Bank is on the horizon, and now Charlotte and Dana Brooke are making Sasha Banks their prime target. So who else does Sasha Banks bring into her aid? Becky Lynch, of course. So Money in the Bank, Charlotte and Dana win via shenanigans, and Becky and Banks argue with one another after the match. Now we reach a tricky part of the booking, the draft. I've gone on record saying that I'm a fan of the draft when it's done right, because it gives multiple stars a chance to shine instead of 5 hours of the same people. So in 2016, Sasha and Charlotte were drafted to Raw while Becky was sent to SmackDown. I'm tempted to keep things this way. The draft also brought Carmella, Eva Marie, Alexa Bliss, and Nia Jax to the main roster, as well as Finn Balor, Mojo Rawley, and American Alpha, but they aren't the topic at hand at the moment, so ignore them. So I'd keep the draft mostly the same, except this time instead of Nia Jax, Bayley is drafted to Raw, while Nia faces Asuka to take over Brooklyn for the women's title. Now I know most of you are going to rush the comments to complain about this choice because Nia Jax can't wrestle. And, Bayley, was Asuka really going to lose to Bayley at Brooklyn? Didn't think so. Bayley then has to be coming to Raw with the draft, and at the Battleground, Sasha Banks defends the championship against Charlotte and Becky in a triple threat, with the commentators playing up that if Becky wins, then that means the championship moves to SmackDown. This was a toss-up on my part, but I ultimately decided to keep the belt on Banks here. It'll make sense soon because, meanwhile, Becky goes off to SmackDown alongside their new women's division. Over on Raw, we have Bayley debut the night after Battleground to team up with Sasha against Charlotte and Dana on the road to SummerSlam. I've never been a huge fan of Sasha and Bayley as a team, but the general consensus is that people like them, so I won't be selfish here. Bayley beats Dana Brooke, no feet on the ropes botch for crying out loud, and then the match is made by Mick Foley. Bayley versus Charlotte, winner gets Sasha at SummerSlam, and Charlotte wins. Boo. Because then we get Charlotte with nuclear heat, and Bayley can still recover. Just give her some wins over the lower card of the Raw Women's division with Dana Brooke and others. Over on SmackDown, things are pretty similar to real life for Becky. She has her mini feud with Bliss on Bliss's debut, giving Alexa a cheap win, building up the division a bit. SummerSlam comes, and it's Banks versus Flair, with Charlotte cheating to win back the women's champion title chip, because for this reason, Charlotte has been losing a good bit here, and swapping the belt between them isn't the end of the world, because in some cases, it can make a more compelling story. Also on SummerSlam, Nikki Bella returns for the 6-woman tag match. She pins Carmella, keep that all the same. And Naomi is also a face now, apparently. But yeah, she got super over with the glow gimmick, so let's let her have this. Now on the path to the Raw Clash of Champions, things are lining up with real life here. Charlotte retains against Banks in a rematch. No Bayley this time, though. Don't want too many horsewomen mashups. Bayley has instead found herself trying to build herself back up since her Raw debut didn't go quite as well as hoped. Hopefully beating her down as a story will get people rallying behind her. At Backlash, Becky Lynch wins the six-pack to become SmackDown Women's Champion because it was a great moment for her, and Carmella versus Nikki didn't need the belt. Hell in a Cell comes, and Sasha and Charlotte are locked inside the cell like in real life, but this time Sasha regains the championship by locking in a bank statement with a kendo stick. This will make sense, I promise. We've got the belt back on Sasha, but now we've helped keep Charlotte credible. Meanwhile, Becky misses No Mercy, like in real life due to her injuries, I believe it was, preventing her from defending against Alexa Bliss. So Bliss becomes no more tenders by cheating her way to a win over Naomi. Now, I would say it's time for the next feud, but we find ourselves in November in the era of the draft, which means it's time for red shirt versus blue shirt. But hey, let's make Survivor Series worth something. First things first, and this will make sense momentarily, Alexa Bliss wins the title and wraps the Survivor Series from Becky Lynch. So in this booking, whichever side wins the women's 5v5 gets one woman from the other show, men's get one man from the other show, and the overall winner gets the rights to the next free agent. Raw wins the women's 5v5, SmackDown wins the men's, like in real life. This time, SmackDown wins the overall show and earns the right to the next free agent, which is going to be, that's right, her. No Emelina gimmick, just straight up evil Emma, just the way I like her. Now, as for those two random moves, SmackDown gets Sami Zayn, who can immediately kick the head off The Miz for the IC title and stay the hell away from his Braun Strowman burial. And Raw gets into their ginger in the form of Becky Lynch. Now you see where this is going? Emma now rounds out the SmackDown Women's division, where you can have Naomi, Nikki Bella, and Natalya as your prominent faces, and Emma, Bliss, and Carmella as your heels. Because I feel like it, Nia Jax will have wrapped up her time in NXT at this point, so they get her as well after Survivor Series, because why the hell not? Now, fortunately, this allows me to just focus on one show. Monday Night Raw has 4 of the Horsewomen on it, and WrestleMania is just 5 months away, so here goes nothing. Sasha Banks is Raw Women's Champion, heading to Raw's next pay-per-view, Roadblock end of the line. She finds herself going one-on-one with Becky Lynch, who's just moved over from SmackDown and wants to challenge her under the idea that she never got a chance to win back the SmackDown Women's title, so she wants a match for the Raw Women's title, and she's given that by Mick Foley. Also on Roadblock, we have Charlotte versus Bayley, where Bayley finally gets a big win, and people should hopefully be pretty happy for her to get that win. Sasha also beats Becky on this show. This brings us to the Royal Rumble show, where it's going to finally be time for that big Sasha versus Bayley title match. In this match, Bayley is the pure white meat babyface, so Sasha brutally attacks her during the match, turning heel and hitting Bayley with the title, while the referee is down so that she can retain. Banks is back, and she is the boss once again. Fastlane is the next stop for Raw on the road to WrestleMania. Sasha now finds herself surrounded by 3 challengers in the forms of Charlotte, Bayley, and Becky. On that episode of Raw, Charlotte, Dana Brooke, and Sasha team up to take on Bayley, Becky, and Alicia Fox, who was literally the only other woman on the Raw roster at this point, as Summer Rae was on her way out. They win, the faces win, and Dana gets tapped out by Becky. So at Fastlane, because he decided that the 4 of them are causing too much trouble, Mick Foley announces that it will be Sasha Banks versus Bayley in a rematch for the Raw Women's Championship, this time under no DQ rules, so Sasha Banks can't just cheat to victory. Becky Lynch will now face Charlotte. Now, I know there's a lot of them facing one another in singles matches and tag matches throughout this, but think about it like this. This is Becky and Charlotte's first one-on-one match, Bayley's second one-on-one match with Sasha, and then you have Charlotte and Sasha, who have probably had about 8 or 9 singles matches, but we're 2 years into this thing at this point. At Fastlane, Becky and Charlotte wipe one another out, causing a no contest, both women doing a big move through the announce tables and not being able to answer the ref's count. Where elsewhere on the show, Sasha retains against Bayley because the no DQ stipulation better favors the ruthless style of the boss. So now here we are, the road to WrestleMania. We announce on Raw that it's going to be Becky versus Charlotte versus Sasha at WrestleMania. Bayley not included due to her losing now twice. Bayley challenges Sasha one more time on Raw, straight singles match, no rule bending. Sasha declines. Bayley tells her she knows Sasha is afraid of what will happen when they meet in a fair fight, because you remember 2 years ago when I sent you packing from NXT. You remember that it was me who had your final match, not Charlotte, not Becky, but me. And I won. Because in this continuity, Sasha Banks' final farewell from NXT saw Bayley beat her on the road to becoming number 1 contender. Sasha accepts due to her ego, and that's your Raw main event. Bayley versus Sasha. No interference, no cheating, a straight one-on-one match, and give them the final 30 minutes of Raw, and they will make magic. Take over Brooklyn, take over respect. These two have shown in real life what face Bayley and heel Sasha can do, so let them do that. In the closing moments, Banks gets a bit too cocky. Bayley hits a top rope belly to belly and pins Sasha, making the fatal 4-way for WrestleMania. WrestleMania comes, and this is one of the big matches on the card. Fatal 4-way. First time in 2 years, the 4 horsewomen of NXT will face each other all at once, and this time it's elimination. Charlotte's the first one gone thanks to the 3 teaming up against her. Sasha's actually eliminated second after a top rope Bayley to belly rolled through into a second, and then it's down to the battle of respect. The 2 that have never gone one-on-one on the main roster at this point. Bayley and Becky, and honestly, either of them can win it, and I'd be happy. My heart leans towards Becky, but she had the SmackDown Women's title, so this is where Bayley should have her crowning moment. And yeah, it happens. And that's where the big story comes to an end. That's a full 2 years of me essentially trying to make the women's division feel stacked and feel important. For a bit of where are they now, though? The draft will send Charlotte to SmackDown to keep her away from Sasha. Raw will also get Alexa Bliss brought over from SmackDown, who lost the belt in the singles match to Naomi at Mania. Natalya makes the jump for the sake of numbers. SmackDown also gets Dana Brooke so she can reunite with Charlotte, or just not, preferably. Through 2017, Raw and SmackDown get new stars like the Riot Squad, Mandy Rose, Sonya Deville, and most importantly, Asuka. In 2017, the Raw Women's title goes from Bayley to Alexa Bliss, but without Bayley being afraid of a stick. Bliss draws it to Becky. Becky holds it through Mania. Over on SmackDown, the title goes from Naomi to Emma instead of Natalya. Charlotte wins it from Emma, and then actually loses it at WrestleMania to Asuka because Charlotte shouldn't have beat the streak. Save that for someone who needs it. Becky is attacked by the Iconics like Charlotte was, and Carmella cashes on her and wins the Raw Women's title instead after WrestleMania. After Mania 34, Becky is sent to SmackDown. The Battle Royal winner is Naomi, who jumps into a feud with Carmella on Raw because she remembers that the Women's Battle Royal was supposed to give her a title match. She forgot it in real life. They forgot it in real life, apparently. 2018, the belt goes from Becky to Carmella to Rousey to put us in the right timeline. And the SmackDown title goes from Asuka to, yes, Charlotte. But Charlotte wins it in the triple threat with Becky, pinning Becky to set the man story into motion. Asuka's first pinfall or submission loss can come at WrestleMania 35 for, oh yeah, her. So the Women's Championship matches at 35 see Charlotte win the Battle Royal because why not? Sasha Banks breaks Asuka's undefeated streak, and Becky Lynch taps out Ronda Rousey in the main event. And to wrap it up nicely, Bayley turns heel in 2019, wins the SmackDown title. It stays the same from there. People like that run, so I won't Vince McMahon it just because I didn't like it. Becky still holds the title for a year, but this time drops it to Shayna. Charlotte uses her Mania 35 Battle Royal match to face Sasha at Money in the Bank and cheats her way to a win, is cashed in on, sets that story in motion. Women's tag belts, the Iconics are the first champs and get the run through the middle of the year where they lose them to Bliss and Cross, which sets us back on track. Bayley and Sasha can get them during the Golden Role Model stuff. And that should put us pretty much back on track, but gives us a more interesting story to the women's division other than Charlotte wins LOL. Whew. So, tell me what you thought. Did I screw it all up? Are you mad that I gave Charlotte title wins? Anyway, tell me what you thought in the comments. This was genuinely one of the hardest bookings to do. I mean, I've written almost 7,000 words for this thing. That's more than double the last one I did. But anyway, tell me what you think. What do you think I should tackle next? If it intrigues me, I'll consider it. With that said, I've been Zander. That was a rebooking, and I had a nap after that one.